previously we talked about schema. Who remembers what a schema is? What's a schema? That's your second choice? She's quicker with the notebook. You got it? Oh, that's kind of scary. So yeah, they're schemas. You remember they're structures, they're mental models that help us think about the world. So they're mental maps. Social schema help us figure out how to navigate the world of social interactions. And these are essential for us because we are a social species. We have to be around people to really flourish. So one thing that comes along with social schema are stereotypes. It's absolutely unavoidable to have stereotypes and have schema. Because the whole idea of stereotypes, well, not what they do for us, is they allow us to make predictions about people, groups of people. So stereotypes in themselves aren't necessarily bad. They can be, but if they're inaccurate or used poorly. But stereotypes are real important because if they just make processing much faster. There's two major types. There's the prototype theories in stereotypes and exemplar theories. A prototype theory is one that has an abstract basis. An abstract basis. So it's just kind of a generalized understanding of what something is. An exemplar theory is one that is built on a specific individual. So you might imagine, to contrast these, a prototype theory, if I said imagine a college student, many of you probably just kind of have this generic person in your mind. But if I were to say, this is a college student and she's your prototype, then you would kind of make all your assumptions based off of this one individual. So if you knew one person, that would be a prototypical basis for stereotype. We okay over there? Okay. Another related idea is going to be that of self-fulfilling prophecies. And Snyder was the one who really brought these along. He had a great study that he did in 1977. And so this idea of self-fulfilling prophecy is built around the idea of how does your mental state affect outcomes? And he had this really clever study that gets a little complicated, so bear with me. But what he did is he had his subjects, he had males and females as subjects, and they would talk to each other on these phones. So you go into the lab and you talk to the guys would be talking to women on the phone, and the guys would have pictures of who they thought they were talking to. Right? They'd have pictures of who they thought they were talking to and these little descriptions about them. The problem was, what they didn't know was that the pictures didn't match who they were talking to. All right? So they have this conversation, and then the young men are asked to rate, well, how do you feel about this experience? What do you think about this person on the other end? And guess what? Those people, those guys who were talking to girls they thought were very attractive, just found them captivating. Just found them absolutely captivating. Geniuses, interesting, fascinating. Now, there's more to this story, though, before women get too smug out there. The women, without seeing who they were talking to, were also asked to rate the person on the other end. And what they found is that the guys who thought that they were talking to beautiful women were more attractive than those who thought that they were talking to less attractive women. So there's all sorts of weird interactions. Hey. Huh? No. No, we do that so that I can sync my sound up. But thanks for offering. It's not a neurosis. Have fun. All right. I was lying about self-fulfilling prophecy, wasn't I? So it turns out that our expectations are profoundly important. And this will come into play also in a few minutes when we get to talking about attribution theory successes. But it turns out that who you think you're talking to matters, these expectations. This is not completely unrelated to experimenter bias. Remember that? Where if you know what group your subject is in, you might rate them differently inadvertently. Does anybody remember this from way back? It's related to that. There's a lot of application to this, and it kind of gives a little bit of weight to the idea that the attitude you go into something is important. If you go into a class expecting that it's going to be lousy, then you're probably going to find that it's a lousy class. If you go into a class excited about it, chances are better you'll be excited about it. A night on the town, same thing, and on it goes. Prejudice can be either a negative or positive evaluation directed toward members of a group. We think in popular usage of prejudice being a bad thing, of it being a negative thing. But in fact, it can be a good thing. Think about name a group that you can think of that you have positive feelings about, and if you were to meet somebody, you would think good things about them just based on that group. Doctors, astronauts, pastors, like Lewis, pipetting. Oh, like preachers, that kind of pastor. Okay. Authors. Really? Okay. I'll go with it. So, but that's prejudice just as much as if you have racial or ethnic or religious prejudices. And they also have something of an adaptive role, the prejudices, because it allows you, just based on probability, it allows you to make a judgment of how someone's likely to behave, what they're likely to do. Now, the good news about prejudice is because it's a generalization, it may be correct or not correct. So the good news is through exposure to members of a group, prejudices can be mitigated. So if there's racism or homophobia or, all your isms, they tend to be reduced by contact with members of the group. So that's that. A lot of kind of separate ideas today that you just kind of have to put together into a piece the best you can.